Hey guys, we're going to talk version control today, and today's thoughts are brought to you by the corporate overlords at GitHub, who in turn answer to the corporate overlords at Microsoft. It is actually kind of cool that they offer this service. It works pretty well. It is not the only way to do this, but I'm going to preface everything through GitHub in this conversation. So what GitHub does is it lets you deal with that really annoying thing you have once in a while where you're going to change a project pretty substantially and you don't want to accidentally break it completely. You'd rather have some version of it that works, but you're going to try a pretty major rewrite, so you do some kind of save as thing, right? So GitHub just gives you an organizational way to do that also lets you keep track of changes and who made them and collaborate with other people and raise issues and resolve issues and have kind of dynamic to-do lists. Git is a pretty powerful tool. GitHub is not the only way to use Git, but it is a good way to use Git. I'm sure I'll take some flack for that. Feel free. Come at me, bro. All right. So let us say, for instance, that you were trying to get OneNote to work. All right. So let us say, for instance, that we had some project on our computer. So this is going to be local. So locally, I have some little project. I would like to save that somewhere. So in order to save that somewhere, I might put it on a kind of cloud repository. So that's up here. That's our GitHub repo. Or otherwise a cloud repository. There are several services you can use. Like I said, GitHub's not one of them. This initial thing is going to be what's called a publish. So that's going to create this repository in the cloud. There are other ways to do this. You can also create the repository in the cloud first, and then fill it on the local computer. If you chose to do that the other direction here is called a clone, right? That's when you copy a repository. So I now have two kind of versions of this. So I'm working along, making some saves. I fiddle with my file a little bit. After I've done several things, I'm going to do what's called a commit down here. So usually that's not every time you save a file, right? Because you're hack and bashing, you're compiling, you're checking whether it worked, you're compiling again. So in that process, the file probably gets saved a bunch of times. A commit is, okay, I did this step, right? And I want to save this step. So you wrote a function that you're happy with. So you're going to say, okay, so now that I've got this function working, I want to commit to that change, right? So you're going to do what's called a commit. So that's going to be locally. Then what you're going to do is you're going to push, and that's this direction, that commit into the cloud. And that's then going to induce these commits, right? So now the repo is going to get some commits. And now it should be noted that this first diagram is the kind of simplest way you can use this structure. So then suppose that you wrote this function, you're happy with it, you go home, you'd like to work on it on a different computer. So in order to get back to this stage on that other computer, what you're going to do is what's called a fetch. Right? You're going to go fetch what's in the cloud and you're going to bring it down to your local machine. Now, when you do that fetch, you actually do get all of the history of this thing. It's not super duper easy to go back, but it is there. You could. So now we're here. We do some more commits, right? So we make another commit, and then we want to save our work, so we do another push. And you can see how basically this is working like a Google Drive or a thumb drive where you're kind of making some version changes and then you're just pushing them along. So this is what I'd call the commit to main idea. I don't think this is a good idea. This is really just the kind of single user, like, I want to have a copy in the cloud and I want to keep track of some changes. It's not a terrible idea. Well, okay, it is a really terrible idea. For a single user, it's not bad. So let me show you the kind of more serious version. So the more serious version is we've got some, and this is our repo, right? So we've got our cloud version of this, and we've made some changes to it. And then we think, oh, it'd be really cool if we added this feature to it. So I'm going to take from here, right? And I'm going to create what's called a branch. So the reason I'm going to do that is that I don't want to accidentally break the code that's working, right? We've all been there. So you want to do this kind of save as. Now, this is going to be a little bit more robust than the version here where I had one version in the cloud and one version on my local machine, because I'm not sure this is going to work and I might want to just go back completely, or it might take me several days and I may need to keep the version that's the main version working for some reason, right? Like, this is a bot that I'm using for something. I'd like to keep it up while I work on it. So in that case, we'd want to do what's called a branch. So this is what's called our main branch here. And then this new branch, I'm going to call dev. That's short for development. You can name it whatever the hell you want. It doesn't matter at all. And this blob here is actually just an identical copy of that one there, right? Oh, so I guess I should just say this is dev. So we've made our new branch. You can think about this loosely as a fork, but it's not really. So we've got our new branch down here, and then we might pull this, right? Or not pull, sorry. We might fetch this down to our local machine. So here's our local level. So now we've got a copy of it locally, so we can do some commits. So we're going to go ahead and make some commits. And then we're going to push those up. And that's going to get us to this stage, right? So say we've done this a couple of times. So we've made a couple commits and a couple of pushes. Oops, that's not how you spell the word push. Okay, so we've done a bunch of this, right? Now, at this point, we're done with this branch, right? We've added the feature that we wanted to, and we're happy with it, right? We refactored our code. And now what we'd like to do is kind of get this into main. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create what's called a pull request. So a pull request is going to say, hey, dude, I'd really like to add this to the main branch. And if this is you, right, if you're the only person on this repository, you probably just go ahead and approve that, right? But otherwise, you might have some debate over whether or not this is working. Has it gone through testing? Am I happy with the commenting and the coding style and all that crap, right? So then there might be some more commits required before what it finally gets is called merged. And then usually when it's merged, then you just delete the whole branch, right? Because it's all the commits and stuff are factored in here now. Okay, so that's that. Now, one of the things that might happen that gets a little bit problematic is if in the process here, we had to also do a hotfix, right? So like, while you were off working on this, the bot went down for a hot minute. I had to fix it, so I did, right? I made some little commit. That made a new version. Then I pushed that, right? And now what I've got is I've got a new version of main that might not, sorry, I said I just pushed this. That's not really a push. There's a pull request and a merge that happened there, right? So this all went to a local machine and then all this crap. I realized this got complicated. So bottom line is I have a new version of main that has some little change in it. But in the process of my development branch, maybe I changed things so that that change no longer works, right? So I might have between these two what's called a merge conflict. That's something I might have to resolve before I can get this to happen. I want you to know that this might happen because it will happen to you eventually, that you'll have forgotten something and then you'll run into a merge conflict. It really happens fairly often. Usually it's because you saved the wrong branch and started working on something. Be a little bit careful with your branch names and what your goals are with them, and this will happen to you less. Okay, so hopefully this is now clear as mud. This is generally the idea of like how the words work, but how does it actually work is a little bit more complicated. So let me go ahead and get out GitHub Desktop. Okay, so this is my GitHub Desktop app. You can see that it's got the current repository that it's in. These are the repositories that this computer has. You can see the current branch that I'm in. There's a button that does fetching and pushing here. And then I've got some options over here. And then I've got my changes, things that have currently changed. I've made a last commit on this, so nothing's currently changed. And then you've got some history stuff. So like you can see what the change I made was on that last commit. So that's generally the anatomy of this tool. Let me show you how to create a repository. So I'm going to do File, and you can either create the repository on GitHub and then pull it down, fetch it down, or you can create it locally and then publish it. Doesn't matter which one you do, but you probably want to pick one. If you try to do both, it'll get all jacked up. So don't just create one in both places because it won't like that at all. So I'm going to hit New Repository, right? And I'm going to name this one Test Repo. And then I'm going to initialize it with a README, and I'm just going to hit Create. And this is going to take a second because, Microsoft products. Okay, so we've got a repository created, and now we're going to publish it. So that's going to be this arrow that pushes it. Sorry, I keep saying that. That publishes it up to the cloud. So publish, and we're going to go ahead and say that it can be public. You only get so many private repositories. Okay, so this is going to also take us. Okay, and now we've got it published, and I'm just going to open this with VS Code. Okay, so here's my README. This just has the repository name on it. I'm just going to change this to say this is a README. And then I'm going to hit Control S, so now that's saved. And now in here, I'm going to see that change. If it's not showing up, you probably didn't hit Control S. And then down here, we're going to get our commit message. So the commit message is just the kind of title that goes with it. So like if I go look at one of my other ones here, I have, changes to DE's example file, right? And then if I, let's see, this is my description, right? So I might see still to do, blah, blah, blah. Stuff that you're intending later, or issues that it might possibly raise, or a longer description of what it is that you did, right? So like I refactored this using objects. Those objects are, right, like a list of things that you did. Generally, this is something that your project manager is going to review. They'll look through all your code, but this will help them understand why. Well, I would hope they'll look through all your code. We'll talk about that later. Okay, so I made this change, right? And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a commit title, right? So I'm actually okay with the default title here. I'm just going to say added obvious text. This is a crappy example, but it's fast. And then I'm going to do kind of a bad thing. I'm going to commit this to main. Okay, and now we can push our commits, right? So we're going to send them up. If you don't push your commits, then they only exist on this computer. So if you're planning on working on this at home later tonight, then you're going to be real disappointed when none of your changes are there. So now I have pushed things, right? And now if I made some changes at home and then pushed them, I might come back to this computer and say, okay, the first thing I want to do before I work on anything is I want to fetch the origin. I want to make sure that I'm operating in the right branch, and then I want to make sure I've run a fresh fetch before I start working on anything. That'll help cut down on your merge conflicts. So now I've got my README. I realize that I misspelled this, so I'm going to change that. I'm going to hit Control-S. I'm going to look in my changes. I'm going to see that we deleted the line with this and replaced it with the line this, right? So we updated the README. I'm just going to say that we fixed a typo in README because I think that's a better title. This one I'm not completely sure needs a description, so I'm just going to leave it without one. You should have one of these. You should fill in, please, dear God. Also, don't lie about what you did in them. It makes life really hard. This is like your kind of comment for your change log, right? So the more useful you make them, the better your life's going to be. So now I'm going to hit commit. So that's going to save, right? And now we have a local commit waiting to be pushed. If I wanted to change something else, like I wanted to add a line like, now with more lines, we can hit save. Then we can notice in here that we've got our changed file. Notice I'm still given the option to push. So that's going to push from the last commit, right? Not from this one. So I'm going to say we are now with lines in README. And we're going to hit commit. Okay, so now we've got 2 commits to make. So now we're going to push on both of those. And this is our kind of first style, right? Okay, so now we'll see that we've got those commits made. Great, awesome. This is kind of that first commit to main style. I'm not a huge fan of this, but it's fine if you're working on your own projects. That said, if you want to create yourself a second GitHub account, you can get a little schizophrenic with yourself. And you can do this kind of thing that you'll see me doing in this repository, where I'm acting as one of my accounts, and I have another account that's acting as the senior dev. So if you want to work with another person to review your code, this is how it would work. You can see here that I'm ready to create a, oops, let's see. So you can see here that I'm ready to create a pull request from this one. So this is working on the development branch. I'm actually ready to do this. So I think I've made enough commits that I'm, and done enough testing that I'm ready to merge this back into the main branch. So I'm going to hit create pull request, and then we'll get a GitHub. It'll actually open in your browser. So this is something that has to happen on the website. You can't just do it on the GitHub Desktop app. So you can see that we can go ahead and we can request a reviewer. So I can request myself. This is my other account. Right, so I've requested the other version of me, the senior dev version of me, to go ahead and do that request. And I can see that it's comparing the main branch and the development branch. And this is going to be the completion of version 1.3 for this project, but whatever. Okay, so hang on one sec while I erase. Okay, so much like the commit messages, your pull request gets a title and some kind of description. The description for this is pretty brief because I'm doing the reviewing on myself here. This might need to be longer. Then I'm going to hit create that pull request. And now I can see that it's got these commits, right, that are created. So I can see what the commits did. I can at least see the titles. If you click on them, you can see the descriptions, right, which is why it's important to do that. I can see that I've got a review required and that I can't merge. I've set some permissions on my repository so that I can't do the merges. That other account, this one, has to do the merges. So I'm going to sign into that other account quick and show you what that looks like. Okay, so now over here, I have my my other account that's looking at this pull request, right? So I've got a pull request. I'm looking at this pull request, and then I've got some review that I can do. So I set it so it has to be reviewed by at least one person. So if I want to hit review, I can see, okay, so there's a binary file. I don't care. Actually, I probably shouldn't say I viewed that because I didn't. I can see that the JSON, blank JSON file was changed. Those changed. Those look fine. This one is just an HTML file. I'm not worried about that one. The JSON file I may be interested in, so I might hit that. It looks like all this was created. I might pull this down and do some testing on it just to make sure it's working. Just a broad glance at it, that looks fine. The tech file I'm also not going to review. Some stuff got moved around, it looks like, but not changed. I can see the main. Okay, so it looks like a change was made to manually change the input file. I can see what happened there. You guys get the idea. I'm basically just going through and I'm reviewing the changes that happened. Okay, yeah. Oh, it looks like I fixed some typos in here too, right? Okay, so I'm seeing that. I'm going to leave a comment. So I think that I didn't see a change to the to-do list. And there is a to-do list in the README file. So I want that to happen before I'm gonna update this. So I could just have a general comment here, or I'm gonna really force this. So I'm gonna say the to-do list in the README file needs to be updated as well. So you guys can see how this would be useful for a team coding exercise, right? So I'm going to hit submit on that. Oops, I realized I spelled well wrong because I'm a goofball. The other account will now be able to see that. So this is my kind of junior dev version of me, and I can see that there's a comment. I'm like, oh, drat. I knew I needed to do something. So I might go make that change, and then I can make that commit, and that'll show up in here, right? So you don't have to recreate the pull request. You can just, okay. So this has been too long and probably a bit too deep. I encourage you to go play with GitHub. So I'm going to make an assignment that just is really open-ended. I would encourage you to go look at next week's stuff and start doing next week's stuff along with this assignment so that you can kill two birds with one stone. Get your GitHub practice out of the way as you work on the other thing. Using GitHub without a project is really, really hard. If you want to grab a friend from the class or you want to make a second GitHub account for yourself and do some of this junior dev, senior dev stuff, that might be a good idea. I'm sure some of the people in the Discord will volunteer to play that senior dev role. So if you want to do that, please volunteer in the Discord.